Thanks so much for hanging in there. We just checked our Facebook page, and Candace has a question for you, Katie, regarding state funding and paraprofessionals, also known as teachers' aides.
Yeah, so the state funding formula takes into consideration all the positions that might be needed in a school to operate a school effectively. And so it considers things like school counselors, school nurses, paraprofessionals, which are those assistants to teachers who help specifically with special education students and then also in other circumstances as well. So sometimes when a student needs additional kind of one-on-one or more kind of specialized supports, a paraprofessional will be employed to meet that student's needs. So the funding formula takes into account all of those different roles and allocates dollars depending on the needs of depending on what it thinks a district might need. The issue comes into play when it doesn't necessarily, it only is looking at the percentage of students who have a paraprofessional that is needed for their role, that they actually have to have a paraprofessional assigned to them as part of their special education program. That is not necessarily the only times paraprofessionals are needed, and we need to increase the number of paraprofessionals in addition to the other roles in the district as provided by the funding formula. In addition, we have things like school counselors that are so critical, especially in our current times where social emotional needs and trauma are real for many of our students, real things that need to be addressed and supported in our schools. And the ratio of counselors to students in our schools is really not where it needs to be, and that is driven in large part because of the way the state funding formula operates. School nurses are another area that are woefully underfunded. I think, most of us remember having a school nurse in every school we ever attended. That is not, that is really not the case in the state of Tennessee any longer, and something that definitely needs to be addressed. I'll add that the state, as part of the basic education program, it created a review committee that is made up of local leaders, state policymakers, a variety of individuals across the state who annually...
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
That was my Siri. I'm sorry. Who annually take a review what the BEP allocates, make recommendations for changes to the BEP, and every year they make a series of 4, 5, 6 recommendations of the key things that should change to make the BEP more effective in our state. Rarely do we actually adopt those recommendations, and so at a bare minimum, NPEF, the Public Education Foundation, recommends that the state actually adopt the recommendations in that BEP review committee report. And those are things like increase the number of counselors that are allocated in the BEP, increase the number of nurses that are allocated in the BEP, increase teacher pay, like we talked about earlier. These are basic things that we need to have in our schools so that our students have what they need to be successful in school and then beyond. And so just again, if the state could follow through on its own review committee's recommendations, that would take us a long way, even if we can't get to overhauling the BEP immediately.
I really feel for Candace because I had a former roommate who was also a special needs teacher in Metro. Now she works in a different state, but for her it was, we want more help. So what Candace is saying, where they're saying we'd love to help your child more, but they're saying we need more, individualized one-on-one attention. Do you think more funding could potentially, allocate for that, or smaller classrooms? And what are the averages for a Metro classroom if I were to walk into one right now?
So the average is different based on the grade level that you're in. So in K3, the average is 20 students to teacher. The max that it could possibly be is 25, but on average, it has to remain around 20 students. That increases as you go through school. And so in high school, it might be upwards of 25 students, 26 students, et cetera. It's a myth that our classrooms are egregiously large, although that I know that they are larger than we would like them to be in some cases. The district, so the state funding formula gives a total dollar amount and allocates that total dollar amount to Metro schools, and then Metro schools actually determines how it will use those dollars. And so the way that Metro schools does that is actually really thoughtful, and I think it's a model for a new state funding formula at the state. I mean, a new funding formula at the state level. What they do is a student-based budgeting system where they have a base amount for each student, and then they weight the student based on their needs. And so if a student is not on grade level, if a student is behind in English or math, that student would receive additional supports through additional resources, so that the school itself can actually consider the needs of that student when it's building out its plan. That gives the principal a lot of flexibility, the principal a lot of autonomy to really do what the principal thinks is right and best for their students. It also comes with accountability. And so if the students are not thriving in that school, then the district does different things to make sure that changes are made. So the funding formula at the district level is actually really thoughtful, and it takes into account all the different needs of individual students in our district. That's the type of model that we would really benefit from if we had it at the state level.
There was one question on Facebook asking, I want to see how Metro breaks down the allocation of funding for each school. Is that something that parents and viewers watching this could look up easily, or is it posted anywhere to your knowledge?
Yes, you're welcome to email me, and I'd be happy to get that information out to you all. But it is not as easy as it should be, and that's not just a Metro Schools issue. That's across the board. We don't make finding information about schools particularly transparent or accessible in the nation. It's always complicated. And so one thing that we try to do at the Public Education Foundation is be a repository for accurate, transparent data about our students, both the things that are going well and the things we want to celebrate, and the things that need improvement. And so, we're getting ready to release a big report on college access and success of our MNPS graduates. What are they doing after they graduate from MNPS, and what is that story telling us? The news is not always great. In fact, the COVID crisis has increased students kind of dropping out of college, and no surprise. And so, we feel like it's part of our mission and really critical that there be an organization in a community that provides that transparent data. And we certainly try to do that as much as we can. So that funding information, some of it is available on the MNPS website. We certainly have public access to all of it. And so I'm more than happy if anyone wants to follow up with me directly to provide you with the breakdown of how the funding flows in Metro schools.
Now, Katie, if you want to say goodbye to our viewers, maybe sum up your final point regarding the basic education program and the billions worth of taxpayer dollars that are used to fund our schools. If you just kind of want to sum up your final point here before we go.
Sure. I think the most important things to me are that the funding formula consistently and regularly underestimates what it costs to provide an education that any one of us would deem appropriate for our students. It also is just simply not providing enough money, period. And so the very idea of a fully funded system is grossly inadequate, because the fully funded formula is so far below what we need for our kids and our communities. So I hope you all will follow through on being engaged in this conversation around education funding, and really help push for better and more strategic ways to support our students and our school districts.
Thanks
Thank you
so much, Katie. We're going to head to break.
Really appreciate